Hey, it's Soul with another video. Today I'm going to go over what's going to go on with Protection Paladins in the upcoming 7.3 patch. I'm also going to take an early look at the set bonuses and tanking trinkets that we'll be encountering in the Antorus raid. So let's get right to it with the class changes, and well, there's not a lot going on. This is a major patch and not a minor patch where we would typically expect major class changes, but there are a couple things going on. In short, we're getting nerfed a little bit. Even though our Hammer of the Righteous is going to get a small buff, I'm anticipating that this is mostly because of the set bonus that I'm going to talk about later. It's still not a very attractive ability compared to Blessed Hammer. For one, Blessed Hammers is just cool. Like, come on, it's fucking hammers flying around you. How does that compare, you know? But there's also the 12% damage mitigation that we'd have to weigh against the increased block that we'd get, assuming that we take up Holy Shield, because that other talent, I don't even remember the name. I'm not looking at my screen, but I don't even remember the name of the talent because it sucks. But that's something that we're going to have to weigh in carefully when 7.3.5 comes out, assuming that there is a 7.3.5. The big nerf is coming from Seraphim. The cooldown of this ability is going up from 30 to 45 seconds. Now on one hand, this kind of does increase our overall mitigation. The longer cooldown means that our Shield of the Righteous charges are going to be used on Shield of the Righteous, but the longer cooldown basically means there's less Seraphim to use during the course of the fight. On top of that, some of us who are used to using certain cooldowns in line with Seraphim are going to be kind of thrown off. I'm not too happy about the change, but I'm also not too happy about the lack of change when it comes to the stat increase that Seraphim gave us in the first place. It is significant, but its impact has kind of lessened over time. But that's about it for the class changes. I'm going to expect something a little bit more significant coming in 7.3.5 though. Oh, and I guess there were some icon changes for our talents. Whoop-de-doo. So let's get to the Netherlight Crucible, which is something we will encounter in patch 7.3. You'll access this through good old questing, and you power it up alongside your artifact weapon ranks. Right from the start, you'll get a 15 item level increase for your weapon. Yay! After that though, there are a series of milestones that you'll want to hit in order to unlock different parts of the tree. This starts at artifact level 60 and goes all the way up to 75. At 60, you unlock the second level of the first tree. This gives you a random choice of perks, and these can either heal you, give you a bubble, do damage, or provide passive stats. And like I said, these traits can be random. It might be annoying, it probably is. What's interesting, at least according to current PTR testing, it is possible to have the same kinds of traits in each relic. So if you happen to get really lucky and get the Master of Shadows trait on all 3 of your relics, you'll get this additive bonus, or basically all 3 of these traits at once. It's a little difficult to tell from testing, and we can't say this for sure. My guess is that this is true, and at the same time, it's probably a bit overpowered and is probably going to get nerfed before this goes live. As you can see, both my Holy and Arcane relics have the Master of Shadows passive available in the Shadow slot. So this tells me that if I'm able to stack this, I'll basically get an additional, I'd say 10 or 11% mitigation from AoE damage. And that ain't bad, at least so far. It's unfortunate that these traits are random, but I'll mention all 12 of these traits and maybe give you a favorite. I'm not going to talk numbers because all these numbers are wildly inaccurate and have been changing with pretty much every build. So for the most part, go with the idea of the skill and not the numbers that are attached to it. On the Shadow side, we have the following. Master of Shadows gives you a Mastery and Avoidance buff. Murderous Intent gives a bonus to your Concordance of the Legion Fall. Shadow Bind is a proc that has the chance to deal both shadow damage and heal you for maybe the same amount. And this procs twice a minute. Chaotic Darkness is pretty much the same thing. 2 procs a minute but a wider dice roll than Shadow Bind. Torment of the Weak has a proc per minute of 4. It applies a dot that lasts for 15 seconds and stacks up to 3 times. Dark Sorrows only procs once per minute. It applies an 8-second debuff, and when it expires, it deals shadow damage within 8 yards. On the Holy side, we have the following. Light Speed gives you a haste and movement speed increase. Refractive Shell procs twice a minute. It creates a bubble that absorbs all damage and lasts 10 seconds. Shocklight buffs your Concordance of the Legion Fall as well, but unlike the Shadow side, instead of versatility, you get Critical Strike. Secure in the Light procs 3 times a minute. It has the chance to deal damage and apply a bubble to you for 8 seconds. But this bubble isn't as good as Refractive Shell. Infusion of Light is kind of the same thing and kind of not. This procs 4 times a minute, deals less damage, and instead of an absorb, it provides a heal. Light's Embrace provides a hot on yourself. It stacks up to 5 times, lasts 6 seconds, and procs up to 8 times a minute. Personally, I'm not very fond of the Shadow side of these abilities. But if I had to choose 2 favorites, it would probably be Murderous Intent and Master of Shadows. They're passive, they're easy to understand, and if the tier set bonus is still going to be focused on block, then the Mastery from Master of Shadows is going to be nice. Torment the Weak and Dark Sorrows are pretty weak by comparison. The light side has some more interesting choices, but this mostly comes from my personal preference of wanting to just take less damage as opposed to doing more damage. On the holy side, the choices are at least a little bit more interesting. Refractive Shell and Securing the Light will help with our damage smoothing, but depending on the final value that Light's Embrace gives, I'd probably prefer this one. This skill gives me the highest uptime, and overall just seems to be a nice bit of self-healing. Finally, let's get to the bottom traits, which are unlocked at levels 69, 72, and 75. This, of course, is going to be entirely up to your preference as to whether or not you want to deal more damage, heal a little bit more, mitigate more damage, and what have you. For me, it's kind of a no-brainer. I'm going to keep an eye out and see if I can possibly reduce the cooldown of my Ardent Defender just a little bit more. That's about it for the Netherlight Crucible, so let's take an early look at what the set bonuses and the tanking trinkets are going to look like in the Antorus raid. If I'm going to describe the set bonus in one word, it would be unexciting. It's super boring. The 2-set bonus provides 10% additional block, and the 4-piece bonus frankly reads as kind of a joke. When our active mitigation isn't up, the effect of the 2-set bonus is increased by 100%. And it's funny that Blizzard worded the 4-piece bonus the way that they did. It's like they wanted to very meticulously tell players that yes, instead of a 10% increase, it's gonna go up to 20% whenever your Shield of the Righteous buff isn't up. But like I said, this is boring and unexciting, and at least at the moment, it's not working right. Talent set at Holy Shield, my block percentage is at 52%. It should be at 62% because I'm not in combat or otherwise my active mitigation isn't up. I kind of get what Blizzard's trying to do with this 4-piece. They're just trying to narrow that kind of gap of vulnerability that Protection Paladins have whenever they don't have their active mitigation up. What's frustrating though is that instead of covering that vulnerability in some other way, they apply this to our set bonus, and that robs us of the opportunity of just having something really neat as a set bonus instead. Of course, there's not too much more I can say to it. The Antorus raid is a long way off after all, so stay tuned for potentially more bitching in my 735 Protection Paladin video. So let's take a look at the tanking trinkets, and before I get started, I just want to let you folks know that one trinket is missing, and that's the trinket that's going to come from the final boss in Antorus. It was here in the previous build as a placeholder, and currently it's gone. There is a chance that we might not see an extra trinket from this boss, but I'm just letting you know. So let's take a look. Apocalypse Drive is a haste trinket. It's an on-use trinket that lasts for 20 seconds. While it's up, it'll reduce the damage of the next 10 melee attacks by you, and when the ability is not active, taking melee attacks reduces the ability by 1 second. So this trinket isn't something that I'd find very attractive for a single target fight, but in places like Mythic Dungeons or heavy ad fights, this might be pretty neat. This is mostly because of the way that the cooldown of the trinket is controlled. Tanking a bunch of things at once makes this more than possible to use this trinket on pretty much every pull if you're going through a Mythic Plus dungeon, or even faster than that. Dima's Glacial Aegis is a strength trinket. It's an on-use trinket that gives you a whole lot of armor for 12 seconds. It also does a lot of frost damage to enemies around you, and it slows them down, which I don't really care for. I really like the 1-minute cooldown since I can line that up with something else like my Eye of Tyr. While it doesn't really do anything for magic damage, it is overall, I think, a pretty versatile trinket for burst damage, heavy ad mitigation and damage, and single target melee. The Eye of Farg and the Eye of Shatug are a little interesting, but at least at the moment I'm not super impressed by them. The Eye of Farg is a strength and bonus armor trinket, while the Eye of Shatug is a stam and versatility trinket. If both tanks have either of these trinkets equipped, they get a bonus, as you can see. It's either armor or versatility. But the bonus is really small, and despite my low HP pool as a Protection Paladin, I still don't value stamina very much as opposed to other more active stats. That and the bonus armor is pretty weak compared to the 900 Darkmoon trinket. So unless this gets a nice buff, I'm probably going to avoid getting this trinket. The Foe Breaker Titan Guard is a mastery trinket. It's an on-use with a 1:30-second cooldown. It provides a big bubble for 5 seconds, and when those 5 seconds expire, there's a lot of fire damage that's afflicted by people around you. The problem I have with this trinket is that for those 5 seconds, you can't move or use abilities. Now like it says, you can't move or use abilities during Bulwark of Flame. That at least tells me that if the bubble is broken, I'll be able to move again. But at least on the basis of my first impression, I'm not very fond of losing control of my character at all. The Rift World Codex is a stamina trinket. And like I've been saying all expansion, I'm not too fond of a stamina trinket, but I am at least curious as to what in the world this proc is. According to this, taking damage has a chance of something happening. I might get healed, I might have a bubble applied to me, I might do damage, who knows. But unfortunately none of these trinkets are testable on the PTR, even though there's a vendor that sells these trinkets. They're just not there and available to test. So that seems to be it for what's going on with Protection Paladins in 7.3 and a little bit of what might happen in 7.3.5. Of course, you can expect another follow-up guide as we inch closer to 7.3.5 and the Antorus raid, and well, as soon as we get a build with testable material. Thank you for watching, like and subscribe for more of this content, or otherwise, just support me the best way you know how. You folks have a good one, I'll see you in the next video, and stay breezy.